Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. Today we're talking with Daniel Holloway. Daniel, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. And if I wasn't, I'd lie about it.
That's probably the
My
best
aged mother said if you can't have anything else, you can have a positive attitude.
You know, that's what my mom says too. She told me one time, I was complaining about having to go and do a service project one weekend, and I said, where's my free agency in this? And she said, you know, your free agency is if you're happy to go or if you're sad to go, but you're going either way.
Well, there's no free agency with your mother.
You know, as long as you're choosing happy or sad, you're still getting the service done.
That's right. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, what you're doing.
Well, I am a transplant, you might say, here in southern Utah. I moved here about 10 years ago when I got married to my wife. And we just love it here. I'm originally from Texas.
Texas?
Texas, yes.
Where's your hat and cattle?
You know, I didn't get into that. My father was a farmer for many years, but then he got out of that profession and went into business. But I much prefer it here in southern Utah, to tell you the truth. I just like the people here, just like the way of life here. It just better suits us. And so.
What brought you here?
Pretty face. Had a wife, or my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. She while I was on my mission, she actually was a nanny, and she, with the family, moved out here to St. George. And when I got off my mission, we wanted to get married, and she was already established here. I had all my stuff in the suitcase, so just hopped the plane and married 3 weeks after I got home from my mission.
You knew her before?
Yes, we knew her before. Yep.
In Texas?
In Texas, and she's also from Las Vegas. We're a little old-fashioned. We met online on the internet and decided to get married that way.
That's old-fashioned?
That's the new old-fashioned.
New old-fashioned. Hey, that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, and so I now work for a small local business. I manage the office there.
What business is that?
It's called American Management Services, right here in St. George. Been around for 20 years. We do collection services for a lot of local medical offices and city municipalities. And I have 3 beautiful kids, an 8, 6, and 3-year-old.
Well, tell me about them.
My 8-year-old, she's a girl, obviously. She loves to just help out. She's a Girl Scout, and so she's into service projects and trying to do community service that way. She's currently running a drive for refugees, trying to get supplies for them that they might need whenever they come over. You know, just basic, everyday, like toilet paper, toothbrushes, toothpaste, just soap, shampoo, stuff like that. So she's doing a drive to collect supplies for refugees right now. And so she's really into that.
8 years old?
And she's 8 years old. She's very, very minded about other people. It matters to her that other people are taken care of that way. Then I have a 6-year-old son who he's probably the most loving kid you'll ever meet. He
What's
is awesome.
his name?
His name is James. And
James.
then my daughter's name is Margaret. So he is just a loving kid, and he loves to sit and play Halo with me or play Xbox, and so we like to spend time doing that. And then I have a 3-year-old son. His name is Philip, and he likes to think he runs the house. He likes to boss everyone around, but...
How old is he?
He's 3 years old, so he has to, sometimes we have to remind him that he's the youngest, but we let him get away with a lot of stuff.
My son's name is James.
Oh yeah, see, James is an awesome name, I think. It's a powerful name. And when we were thinking about kids' name, we were deciding through a few different names, but just one day we're like, James, it's James. It's just hits you like that's the perfect name.
I had a brother named James, my grandfather named James, my wife's father's name is James, but we named him after James in the Bible.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good book to name him after.
Everything is in James, you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Just ask him faith and it'll be given to you.
And if it's not there, ask James. And he'll
Yeah, that's good.
Well, where do you live now here?
So I live out in Ivins.
Ivins, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a small little town out there. Some people have heard of Tucson. It's that same town right there.
Well, Well, tell me why you're running for office and what office you're running for.
Well, I am running for Utah House District 74, and so that's the House District that comprises of Ivins, Santa Clara, Bloomington Hills, even goes up in Gunlock, and really just kind of that southwest corner of the state. The reason why I'm running is more out of principle than anything else. I'm a firm believer in free market principles, meaning that whenever there's competition, you get better results. Unfortunately for us in the 74th District, we've had a representative who's never really had anybody run against him. And so he's always been just elected, no challenge. And we've been getting some really poor representation. Unfortunately, he has consistently voted to increase our taxes time and time again. He has consistently voted to lessen our freedoms and liberties here, and he's not really fighting the fight for us. And so my motivation was the people need another choice. They need a strong principled, liberty, freedom-centric choice that they can go to, because otherwise we're just going to be stuck with the same old bad legislation. And so I talked to a lot of my friends who also felt the same way, that we needed another choice, we needed somebody else. And it came down to no one else was able to or willing to do it. And I had to ask myself, how much do I actually believe in the free market? How much do I actually believe in that in order for our form of government to work, there needs to be choices? And so I put my own preferences aside. I'd rather be at home than out campaigning, but someone has to do it. And so I talked with my family, I talked with my employer, and we decided that something I could do. So here I am.
Well, where did you go on your mission?
I went to Brazil.
Brazil?
Yeah, I'm fluent in Portuguese and somewhat conversational in Spanish. It's pretty similar, but much more comfortable in Portuguese.
I speak every language but Greek, and English is Greek to me. You've probably heard that before.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the British don't think we speak English.
No, they don't.
Well, back to the race. Specifically, what are you disappointed with the current person? What has he done specifically? What bills and so forth has he supported?
So last year, so not this year's legislative session, but the year before, there's a bill to increase the gas tax by 10% or 10 cents. And he voted to increase that, which I felt like was unnecessary. This year, he voted again to increase our property taxes. And was really disappointing about that was this was the same year that the legislature had a $500 billion surplus. And so they had more money than they were spending. And yet
500 billion?
I'm sorry, 500 million, my bad, $500 million. It's very disappointing to see that we have a Republican-controlled House, Senate, governor, who the Republican Party pretty consistently talks about how they want less taxes, less government, but it seems like every time they get a chance here in our state, they're voting to increase those taxes. They're voting to increase the power of government here, which is completely contrary to what they're saying they want to do. And so they had $500 million more, and yet they increased our property taxes, which to me is just unnecessary, and it's bad governance. And so someone needs to step up. And unfortunately, he voted for that bill.
What did they allege it was going to be spent for?
As far as I understand, it wasn't necessarily specifically proportioned for something, just that they said with the federal tax decrease that the state income tax would have greater revenues because people would have more money because the federal tax would be less.
Right.
And so they lessened the state income tax, but to offset those taxes that they're going to cut, they reapportioned it through the property tax, and it's going to continue to increase year after year.
So they moved it from the income tax to
the property tax.
Well,
yeah.
that was clever of them.
Yeah, I know, right?
You found out about it.
Yeah, everyone found out about it. There's a lot of people within the Republican Party, here, even here locally, who are very upset about that. But they're not even standing up to try to get new representation, because that's just kind of the way the Republican Party is right now. Even here in Washington County, it's a good old boy network. And And they're just not willing to take the hard stance in principle stances. It's always party over principles, which to me is just backwards.
What's the reason they do that?
I think that it's the centralizing of power. When men get power, assume that they have power. They think that they're greater and that they can just do what they want. And so they get into this thing where they're going to keep people out and just centralize power amongst themselves, amongst the people that they like. And unfortunately, it's kind of the sad situation that we're in, not just here in Washington County, not just here in Utah, which is also an issue, but all the way back in Washington, D.C., you see the exact same thing. And in my opinion, the only way for us to break that cycle is we have to break out of this two-party system. And in Utah, really, we have a one-party system where the Republicans control everything. And it's to our detriment. Like I said, we need a free market. If the principles of a free market are what is best for the consumers, then that same principle applies to governance. And we need more than just one party. We need more choices, and we need more elected people from various different parties to be able to have better results in what we're getting out of our government. Because they're only supposed to be there to protect us from infringements on life, liberty, and our pursuit of happiness or property. And oftentimes, they're the ones who are breaking that. They're the ones who are actually infringing on those rights when they're supposed to be there to protect it.
What party are you affiliated with?
That's a good question. So I am with the Libertarian Party of Utah. And so right there you can know libertarians, we don't like taxes, or it's only the bare minimum, only as necessary. And so that's the promise I can give to you and to everyone who votes for me, that I'm not going to be voting to raise your taxes. I'm actually going to do everything I can to lower your taxes, because less taxes, more money in your hand, the better off we all are. You know what to do better with your money than the people up in Salt Lake City.
I've heard of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, that's a tiny little town upstate that thinks they get to dictate to everyone else what to do.
What about term limits?
Term limits is an interesting conversation. There's a lot of people who really like term limits. Me personally, I don't like term limits. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, But if you go back and actually read the Founding Fathers of the U.S. Constitution and what they wanted to accomplish, you'll see that term limits wasn't necessary because the people were supposed to vote the legislators out. The issue with term limits too is you get into these lame duck scenarios where you have a legislator who is in a lame duck period, but then all the power gets centralized into the bureaucrats who are unelected who stay around. And so you don't want that. You want the power to be in the person you elected to be able to make the choices. But if you take that power away from them, you're going to have unelected individuals going to be ones who really calling the shots behind the scenes, and that's a worst case scenario for the citizens.
Terrible. Education.
Education is really important. I have a few friends who are teachers here in Washington County, and I think that I'm not an educator. I don't work in education. I haven't been trained in education. I think it's the role of the elected official to listen to the people who are in the classrooms and to listen to what they say they need. I'm not going to know what they need. I'm not in the classroom. From talking to the teachers I know, they all say that they need more money, they need more funding. There's a lot of money going to education in Utah, and we could do a better job of funding it, but there's a lot of waste.
Where's the waste?
I think in administration, up in the district level. I think we need to do a better job of getting more bang for our buck in the payroll department so that we can alleviate more money to be able to pay teachers better and even have more funding for what they need in the classroom. Because that's the biggest complaint I've heard from teachers is they don't have enough money to buy supplies. They don't have enough money to do things within the classroom to be able to teach the students. And so that's a big issue.
What do you feel about these big ideas they have on water and land here in southern Utah?
Talk about the Lake Powell pipeline?
Oh, you've heard of it.
Yeah. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen, doesn't it? It seems like a whole lot of special interests trying to force the the tax-paying electorate to pay a bill for them to just get rich off of us. So I have a lot of concerns about the specific Lake Powell pipeline. We definitely need water. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But everything that I've seen so far, and that a lot of other people that I respect who do a lot more research into it and follow, they say it's not a good deal for the people who are actually going to have to pay for it. It's going to be billions of dollars and probably more expensive, because when was the last time you saw a government project that went under budget?
I've never seen one.
Yeah, it always seems to be 2 or 3 times more than what they initially say.
At least.
And they're already just telling us it's going to be $1 billion. So think about how much it's actually going to cost us. And so it just
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. It scares you, right? You want to put your head down and sleep at night. But if you think about that, you're never going to catch any Z's.
What other big issues are there?
There's a lot of issues that I want to focus on. Here in Utah, one of the things that we've seen recently is these car dealerships and licensing and franchising that is keeping manufacturers like Tesla, but there's also other car manufacturers like to do this, to be able to sell their products directly to consumers.
Without a dealership?
Yeah, without a dealership they have. And so these franchising laws that require just in this industry. It kind of seems weird that if you were to go and make a product and you want to sell that product to me, it should be as simple as, hey, I have apples, I want to sell you apples. Hey, I want apples, I want to buy apples. Why should there have to be a middleman here to say, well, you have to go to this store to buy my apples, and otherwise you can't buy my apples here in this state? It just doesn't make sense. But that's what's happening with cars. Tesla is very innovative, and they have a great line of products that there's a lot of people who'd like to buy their product here in Utah, but they can't. They have to go to Nevada, California, or Colorado to buy a car that they want to buy.
Is it allowed to be sold in Nevada and Colorado?
Yeah, it's allowed to be sold there. And so Tesla has a model where they don't want to use a dealership. They want to make it as cheap as possible for the consumer. And in doing so, they have to cut out the middleman. And they're willing to sell directly to consumers and provide the warranty themselves and everything that a car dealership would do, but do it themselves. But the state won't allow it. It even went up to the state Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, no, this is okay. And so that's something that, if elected, I want to work with to get fixed. I think that that's completely against the Utah Constitution. Utah Constitution calls for a free market. That's not a free market.
We order almost everything online now.
Yeah.
Not cars.
Yeah, why not cars? Or, yeah, anything really. So that's a big thing. There's another thing that really bothers me that goes on in our government here, and it has to do with the way that Senate districts are drawn. If you go back and look at the 17th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, before the 17th Amendment, senators from each state was actually elected by the state legislatures themselves. But special interests thought, well, that's not good for us. Let's pass this amendment so that the people elect and not the legislature. And then just people with the most money, special interests with most money, will be able to get their guy elected, and then we'll have these senators in our pockets. And that's what we've seen has happen. Likewise, here in the state of Utah, we have something similar going on in our Senate. So with the House in Utah, the House districts are separated by population. And so each House district has roughly the same amount of population that the representative is represented, which makes sense. That's how we do it in the federal level with the House of Representatives in Congress, that it's based off of population. And it allows for this, for states who have large population, have more representation in the government. And that's how it is in the state too. Counties with larger populations have more representatives to represent the needs of the county. In the federal government, there was the small states who are concerned about that and say, hey, we're small, we're not going to have any say-so, and we're going to have needs too. And so they say, okay, we're going to balance this out by each state's going to have 2 senators. And so regardless of how big you are, you have 2 senators. So there's this balancing. Well, in Utah, in our Senate, you would think that we'd want that too. But we don't. The Senate districts are also determined by population. So you have Salt Lake County has 13 senators. there's only 29 senators to begin with. Salt Lake County
They have
has
13?
13 senators. You have
That's
other
rude.
counties. Yeah, I know, right? There's other counties like Washington County, we have 1 senator. There's some small counties out there who have 1 senator and 5 to represent 5 counties. And so the interests of those counties are not being represented very well in our government. It's just the large population. So really, if you live up on the Wasatch Front, man, you are getting represented really well. But if you're like us, we're not getting represented that well. And so I want to see that changed. I like to see, either by a constitutional amendment or however we need to do it, it's 1 senator per county. You get your representative by your population in the House, but your senator should be by county. And I think that would help balance a lot of things going on in the state, so that some of us smaller population counties will get equal representation at the state legislature.
What else?
And I could go on for days, couldn't I? I'd like to see some of these taxes.
Marijuana.
You know, medical cannabis is, from what I've seen, can have some really amazing applications, help a lot of patients in pain or have serious medical needs. The ballot initiative that's going on right now, I support. There's some concerns there, but I would like to see that passed in November when it comes up on our ballot. I think that ultimately a patient should be able to decide what course of treatment they get in conjunction with their medical doctor. I think if you look at other drugs that we are allowing to be prescribed, like opiates,
Terrible.
they're terrible, they're way more dangerous, and when you compare to the side effects that they bring to the side effects of cannabis, if you were in a vacuum and I didn't tell you the names of the drugs, I just said these are the side effects, you would pick the cannabis drug or marijuana 10 times out of 10 because the side effects are so horrifying. You know, we have an opioid crisis here in the United States and here in Utah too. There are
It's
people.
worse in Utah than anywhere.
Yeah, people are dying every day because of this. There's never been one person who died from a marijuana overdose. No matter how hard they try, the body just processes the drugs so fast that you can't die from an overdose of marijuana. So it's a much safer drug, and it allows people to be able to, even with the CBC levels and THC levels. THC is the one that makes the high, but the CBC does more with the benefits for pain management. And so you can have lower THC and higher CBC to be able to manage pain and let people who otherwise wouldn't even be able to work, who are sitting at home on welfare because they can't go out to work, well, now their pain is managed in a way they actually go out and work and have a job. Why wouldn't we want that?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's something that we want. We want people to be able to go out and be able to work and provide for themselves and not have to stay at home and live off the taxpayers because the state won't allow them to take a medicine that could actually help them.
What else?
Like I said, I go on for days and days.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just go. We got some time, right?
We've got 4 minutes left.
4 more minutes. Well, education is really important. Like I said, I think there's another ballot initiative going on that wants to raise our gas taxes again in hopes to get more funding for education. I don't see how that's actually going to work because the plan they have in place is so broad. They're going to end up having so much more money, and then it's just going to go right back to those same administrators who's just going to eat it up in payroll and salaries and stuff like that.
Bigger bonuses.
Bigger bonuses and stuff, and it's not actually going to go to help the students. And also, there's been lots of research done that show that if we put all this money into education, put like hundreds of millions of dollars into education through these increased taxes, we can expect to see a 1% increase in test scores. Think about it. Spend hundreds of millions of dollars and you get 1% better test scores. That's not efficient at all. There's better ways to do this, and I think that there's voucher systems that we could try to vouchers, school vouchers. That could be something that we'd look into. I think that we need to take the lead on this and be innovative and not be so focused on test scores, but focus on teaching kids to how to learn and have a love for learning. That should be more important than trying to get good test scores any day.
What about Common Core?
Common Core has a lot of issues that it is bringing on because of those test scores. I see what they're trying to achieve there in trying to give a quality education to anyone no matter where they're at. It just isn't working, and ultimately the federal government shouldn't be involved in education. That's something that the state governments and on down to local county school districts should have the most control. So when you give more control closer to the individual, the better results we're going to get. So, federally, the Department of Education should be abolished, and that should be run state by state so that each state can look at its needs and how best to meet them.
Maybe they ought to abolish school districts and just have the PTA of the local schools run it.
I'd love to see that. I think that innovative
Wouldn't
ideas
that be
like
clever?
That'd be very clever. We got to get innovated. We got to try something, and then if we allow all these different states and all these different school districts try something different, we'll see what works, and then we can copy it. Otherwise, we're all just trying the same thing, hitting our head against the wall, trying to raise test scores when there's a better way, and we could be.
You need to educate rather than educate or train to the testing.
Exactly.
That's
That's the big thing. I have my 8-year-old daughter. She's been really stressed out these last few weeks about this SAGE testing. That's not what you want. She's 8 years old and she's stressed to the max about trying to do SAGE testing. That's wrong. That's not teaching kids a love for learning. That's teaching them to be scared of it. And that's not going to harbor education at all, or a love for education.
Got 1 minute left. What are your final words?
My final words are this. I'm running for Utah House District 74. I really want to be the representative for the people there because I feel like I know I can do a better job than what we're currently getting. There's a great think tank here in Utah, Libertas Institute, who does an index of all the legislatures. Currently, our representative, he's scoring at 50%. So if you're happy with someone 50% of the time voting for your best interest, then you got something. But I know I can do better than that. I know I can be a 100% of the time freedom voter.
Well, Daniel, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Well, it's been interesting. You've even brought some things to my mind that I hadn't thought about before.
Maybe we should come back and do this again some other time.
Well, what about tomorrow? Oh, they can't do it tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
We'll do that. This is Lane Ronno from the campus of Dixie State University. Thanks for being with us on A Story to Tell.